Last week, we talked about the origin of the universe, what that event was like, and what the cause must have been like. What we're going to look at today is what the world that resulted looks like. What is this world like? Is it just something that maybe could have come together by chance? Or is it something that points to design? Is it complex or is it not complex? That's the question we're going to answer. So first, we're going to see that this world is actually our home. What do we mean by home? We mean that it is just right for us. Sometimes you go and travel the world, but the world has something that just your home doesn't. It's just right for you. It's all these different things that are just right for you. It's prepared just for you. Now, when we talk about the world, in this case, we're not talking about comfort. We're talking about vital requirements. This is the study of teleology. It comes from the word telos, which means inherent purpose. Think about like a circuit board. Everything comes together to perform a specific function, a specific purpose. Is the world like that? Did all these pieces come together to fulfill a purpose? Or did they come together by chance and maybe they're just something that results? There should be a clear distinction of something that was the result of a mind and something that was not the result of a mind. The result of a mind, and not just any mind, but the greatest imaginable mind, the God of the universe, should look drastically different from something that just came together by chance. Think about the most complex circuit board with a purpose to something that just resulted by chance. That's what we're going to study. Is this world super complex, or is it not complex? Could it have come together by chance? Now, to understand these vital requirements, I need to give you a little picture. Now, this is actually a hobby I was in until very recently. The reef tank hobby. Now, I don't know if you know much about reefs or corals, but I can just tell you that it is very complex. It is very difficult to maintain these amazing systems. Basically, what you do is you have to make a whole ecosystem in your own aquarium. You need a whole life cycle. You need flows of food chain. You need corals, you need fish, you need inverts, you need microorganisms, all these different things. And I could talk about it all day because I love this hobby, but it was hard. And I have to be honest, I lost about 85% of the livestock while I was in this hobby. That's how hard it was. Because I'd maintain all these levels and balances of different conditions in the water chemistry. And that's what we mean by fine tuning. All these different levels have to be just right. So take a look at this illustration. These are just some of the things that I had to measure. So specific gravity, temperature, pH, nitrate, nitrite, ammonia, phosphate, alkalinity, calcium, magnesium. No joke, these are the things you have to measure in the water chemistry in order to maintain a healthy reef tank. Now, if just one of these things is out of place, that can be detrimental to the life in your aquarium. Now, like I said, I only maintained about 15% of my livestock. The rest didn't make it, just because I was not able to stay on top of these balances, on top of this fine tuning. Now, if me, what I hope you'd consider an intelligent being, had trouble maintaining this complex system, what can we say about the universe? If it is super complex, would we expect it to come together by chance? No, if you just roll the dice and that gives you the results, that would look more like on the right side of this illustration, these random spots. The fact is, if just one of these is off, then life is impossible. And that's what we're going to check out in the universe. If just one of these qualities is off, our life is impossible. So once again, the fine tuning is all these different balances and conditions that need to be just right. And this is really the major question. Why does this world feel like home? Why does it feel like it was prepared in advance for us? In my reef tank, I'd prepare all the water chemistry and really just the ecosystem itself with specific creatures in mind. And that's what this world feels like. It feels like it was prepared for us. It's prepared with us in mind. It's because it's precisely the way we need it. So this is what fine tuning means, just so that you can understand this word that I'm going to be using a lot. Fine tuning means narrowly defined constants and qualities vital to the existence of life. I'm just going to give you a few. Gravity. If the gravitational force were changed by, now I'm going to say a lot of zeros, so just bear with me. 0.0000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 Z 1. We couldn't exist. Now, in case you zoned out a little bit in there, that's 37 zeros after decimal point, only after that followed by a 1. Now, to get your mind around that incredibly small number, imagine this. Take a tape measure and stretch it across the entire known universe. And then take just a 1-inch mark on that tape measure. And that's where our gravity is. That's how small it is. Now, I know gravity is measured in inches. It's just to get your mind around this mathematically minuscule value. Now, if you take our gravity and you take it in 1 inch in either direction, our life is impossible. Now, again, this is stretched across the entire universe, and just 1 inch in either direction, and life is impossible. That is incredible. Or take the expansion rate of the universe. If the universe expanded just 1/millionth slower, it would have collapsed back on itself. If it had expanded any faster, no galaxies, stars, or planets could have formed. So any slower, we can't exist. Any faster, we can't exist. That's fine-tuned to one place in 100 sextillion. I had to look up that number because I did not know what this number was, followed by all those zeros. So 1 chance in 100 sextillion. To wrap your mind around what that number is, imagine this, as Lee Strobel explained. That's like traveling hundreds of miles in space and throwing a dart at the Earth and hitting a bullseye measuring a trillionth of an inch in diameter, an area less than the width of a single atom. That is incredible. Now let's just take the likelihood of just those two constants together, the gravitational force and the expansion rate of the universe. Lee Strobel explained, their level of fine-tuning is to a precision of 1 part in 100 million, trillion, a number 74 digits long. I mean, that's like 1 atom in the entire known universe. So imagine this. I pick out 1 atom out of the universe and I paint it black. I throw back in there and mix up all the atoms. Then I put a blindfold on you. You can't see. I push you into the universe and say, okay, pick up 1 atom. What's the probability that you're going to pick up the 1 atom that I painted black? That's the probability of just having these 2 constants. Now, there aren't just 2 finely tuned constants. As Dr. Frank Turek and Dr. Norman Geisler explained, it's not that there are just a few broadly defined constants that may have resulted by chance. No, there are more than 100 very narrowly defined constants that strongly point to an intelligent designer. There actually have been 122 constants identified, equally impressive in their fine-tuning. Now, we just saw 2, and we saw the probability of those 2, and there are 120 more that are identified. Here are just a few that I'm going to list out for you. The electromagnetic force constant, the strong and weak nuclear force constants, the right amount of water in the Earth's crust, the perfect angular tilt of the Earth, the right planetary mass, the planet Jupiter. That's an interesting story right there if you guys want to ask in the Q&A session. The right concentration of sulfur, the balance between the centrifugal force and the gravitational force, the velocity of light, the perfect rotation time of the Earth, and the right amount of seismic activity. Now, notice that's just 6, another 6. That's just 12 more. So we've just investigated 14 of the 122. Now, astrophysicist Hugh Ross has calculated the probability of these constants existing for any planet, not just our planet, any planet, to be 1 part in 10 followed by 138 zeros. That's 1 in this incredible 4-line number. Now, as Dr. Frank Turek and Norman Geisler explained, there are only 10 to the 70th power atoms in the entire universe. In effect, there is 0 chance that any planet in the universe would have the life-supporting conditions we have, unless there's an intelligent designer behind it all. So I want you to understand really just the gravity of this reality. So let's imagine there's a competition going on. If you flip a coin 100 times and get 100 heads in a row, you're going to win a country. You're going to be given a country, the power, the land, everything. Worth a try, right? What could you lose? Well, what's the probability that you're going to do this? The probability is that you have one chance in about 1 nonillion. Again, I had to look up this number because I couldn't read all those zeros to understand what that was. So one chance in 1 nonillion. Now, what are your chances? Because for us, that's just a big number that we don't comprehend. Well, let me just tell you, you don't have a chance of getting it. Not if you're flipping nonstop for 100 years, for a million years, or even 1 trillion years. That's how small the chance is. So you can be flipping again and again and again, trying to get 100 heads in a row for even 1 trillion years, and you don't have a chance. You don't have the probabilistic resources. You don't have enough time. You don't have enough number of trials. Knowing those odds, let's imagine that your neighbor comes over and claims he's done it. Now, since we know how improbable it is, what do we say? Good job, congratulations. Or would we begin to get suspicious? Or let me tell you another way. Let's imagine that someone gives you a coin and says, here you go, try it. We flip the coin. Heads. A second time. Heads. A third time. Heads. A fourth time. Heads. And so on and so on. Now, maybe we'll believe it maybe 10 times through, but if it keeps happening again and again and again, are we going to think we're getting lucky? Or are we going to think that the person gave us a rigged coin? That they are hoping that we win this country? We're going to obviously assume that we got a rigged coin. We know that the more and more it happens, the less believable it is. Now, we know that something more than chance seems afoot. Did they cheat to get this unimaginably improbable sequence? Now, this was just to get 100 heads in a row. And we saw that just to do that, if anyone claimed to do it, it would be unbelievable. We know that stuff like that just doesn't happen. Now, this number, about 1 nonillion, isn't a drop in the bucket of the number 10 to the 138th power. Just look at this. The first number doesn't even take up a whole line. 10 to the 138th power takes up 4 lines. And we've gotten this. Something more must be afoot. Did someone cheat the system to defy those odds? And I'm not the only one pointing to this as evidence for a designer. Astronomer Fred Hoyle said, a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. Or even the late Stephen Hawking said, the remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. So the fine-tuning really isn't debated. No matter what field or view scientists hold, they admit the fine-tuning. Where they all diverge is the explanation of the fine-tuning. And this is something you'll learn in many of these arguments, that the facts are the facts. Many people agree upon the facts, but it's the explanations of those facts that make us all diverge. So what are the 3 explanations for the fine-tuning of the universe? Physical necessity, that it has to be this way, chance, that we just got lucky, or design, that there's a mind behind it. Let's investigate physical necessity first. So physical necessity says it exists the way it does because it has to exist this way. It could not fail to exist this way. But in order for them to have to be the way they are, they would need to be determined by the laws of nature. But as Dr. William Lane Craig said, the constants and quantities are not determined by the laws of nature. There's no reason or evidence to suggest that fine-tuning is necessary. The fact is that the expansion rate of the universe could be different. The strong and the weak nuclear forces could be different. The other constants and quantities could be different. Obviously, there could be less water in the crust of the Earth. Obviously, the angular tilt of the Earth could be different than it is now. Obviously, there could be less mass of the Earth. There could be less planetary mass. It could be bigger, it could be smaller. All these things could easily be different. At least one of these things could easily be different, making our life impossible. So we cannot explain the fine-tuning by physical necessity, because these constants could quite easily fail to be where they are now. So now, as we ease into the explanation by chance, I need to explain a few things. First, Some would claim and explain that every universe is just as improbable. And I want you to understand where they're coming from, because they do have a point here. Imagine a lottery. Let's say there are 1 million lottery tickets in one lottery. Now, every one of those lottery tickets is just as rare. By definition, it's literally 1 in 1,000,000, right? They're just as rare. But the fact is, we're not arguing for the existence of this particular world, but a life-permitting world. So as Dr. William Lane Craig said, contrary to popular impression, the argument for design is not trying to explain why this particular universe exists. Rather, it's trying to explain why a life-permitting universe exists. So just look at this illustration. On the left, that's more of a drawing of like what we try to explain if we're just trying to explain why a particular universe exists. The fact is, every universe on the wheel is just as rare. Just like every lottery ticket, no matter what the number is just as rare because it's one of a kind, right? Well, that's exactly what that is. But when we really make it less ambiguous, we really clarify some terms that we're trying to find not why a particular universe exists, but a life-permitting universe. We find it changed drastically. That's what's on the right. The fact is, only life-permitting universe counts as winning. So in the analogy with the lottery, only the winning ticket counts. We got the winning ticket. And that is separate in the sense that it's different from all the rest, not just from them individually, but from all the rest. It has something that none of the rest have. It is colossally more improbable than all the others. Just as this universe is colossally more improbable than a non-life permitting universe. So we're not arguing why a particular universe exists, as all are unlikely, but why a life permitting universe exists, as it is massively more unlikely than a non-life permitting universe. Now, another thing, let's imagine that our friend, little Freddie, who's 8 years old, is playing ball out in the street. Now, all of a sudden, this truck, this 18-wheeler, comes blazing down the road. Obviously doesn't see him, going way over the speed limit. It's not looking good. Now, little Freddie, he has this problem that he gets petrified whenever he's scared. He cannot move. So he's standing there in the middle of the road. All he can do is close his eyes and wait. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Nothing happens. What happened? He runs inside and tells his parents all about it. He says he's playing the ball within the road, just like they said he shouldn't have. This truck was coming. It was going to hit him. And they're like, what happened? How did you not get hit? He says, of course I did get hit. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here to talk about it. And there's a problem there. Obviously, his parents are overjoyed that he didn't get hit, that he's there to talk about it. I'm sure they care about him a whole lot. The fact is, that doesn't explain what happened, does it? Well, some kind of do that exact same thing when trying to explain the universe. It's like they say, oh, we're here to talk about it. So of course the universe is just right. But the fact is, the fact that we're here to talk about it doesn't explain how we are here. It doesn't explain how the universe is just right. It explains nothing. So of course we wouldn't be here to talk about it if these things and conditions weren't just as they are. But that doesn't explain why they are the way they are. The fact is, we didn't just have one quote unquote truck rushing to hit us, but 122. Remember, just one of these things could fail to be the way they are, and we would not exist. We realize that we shouldn't be here, yet here we are. Is this a sign of intelligence intervening with us in mind? Obviously, the logical conclusion is that the truck driver looked out from whatever he was distracted with and saw our buddy Freddie, and with all his might slammed on the brakes to not hit him. See, there's a mind behind the wheel who wanted to keep Freddie alive. He didn't want to hurt him. He wanted to make sure that his life continued and was possible. And that's exactly what we find in the universe. There are 122 of these things that should have hit us, but they didn't. Is there a mind behind the wheel with our life in mind, with our life as its purpose, that it wants to make sure that our life is possible? That's what it looks like, doesn't it? So let's just investigate if chance can actually fill in the place of this. Now, before we get to that, just let me clarify something. Chance is not a cause. It's the mathematical probability of something occurring. When I flip a coin, is it chance that flips the coin? No, it's my thumb that flips the coin. Chance simply describes that there's 50-50 chance that it'll land heads or tails, as long as it's not rigged again. So chance is not some entity that's running around doing stuff. My brother Trips says, hey, who did that? Chance did it. No, chance isn't a cause. It's just a mathematical probability of something happening. Now, another important distinction I want us to understand is chance really describes a mindless process. It says without a purpose, there isn't a mind to it, just happens. We just happen to get a result from a series of possible results. This assumes there's no mind guiding the process with an end, a telos in mind. So this is why this is separate from the design option. Chance, by definition, is mindless. There's no purpose behind it. It just happened to happen, just randomly picked from a sequence of possibilities. Now, there are a few problems with choosing chance as a solution. As William Lane Craig said, Roger Penrose of Oxford University has calculated that the odds of that low entropy states existing by chance alone is on the order of 1 chance out of 10 to the 10 to the 123rd power, a number that is so inconceivable that to call it astronomical would be a wild understatement. The fine-tuning here is beyond comprehension. Having an accuracy of even 1 part out of 10 to the 60th power is like firing a bullet toward the other side of the universe, 20 billion light years away, and nailing a 1-inch target. So basically, there's virtually no chance that we can get this result. The probability of these conditions is virtually impossible. Therefore, we have no reason to attribute fine-tuning to chance. Now, I want us to understand that this doesn't eliminate chance as a possibility. You can never really eliminate chance. If something is a possibility, then you can't just say, oh, no, that's impossible. No, by definition, it's a possibility. It's possible. But that doesn't mean it's the best explanation. You see, you can always attribute chance. Like an airplane, you can say, oh, that could have come together by chance. Is it possible? Sure, technically, metal could come together, but that's definitely not the best explanation. You say, no, intelligence is the best explanation. Intelligent beings put this together. They designed it. They put it together. Well, it's the same with this. We can't eliminate chance, but the fact is, when we do science, we look for the best explanation, the best explanatory scope, and the best explanatory power. Now, we're going to investigate design, but we can see that even though chance technically makes it possible for these conditions to be the way they are, it's definitely not a very good explanation. So since we're looking for the best explanation, we're going to move on, as we're very unsatisfied with the opportunity of chance being this explanation. So just before we get to design, there's one more thing. In order to give chance another chance, sometimes people bring up opportunities to increase the opportunities for this result to occur. The multiverse is one of these such theories. So we're going to take a minute to investigate the multiverse. Just because people use this as a last chance to avoid the design hypothesis doesn't necessarily mean it's false. Again, intentions don't mean a theory is false. So we're going to be fair and investigate the evidence for it. So what is the multiverse? And why would people posit that this could be a possibility? Well, if there are an infinite amount of universes, then at least one is bound to look like ours. That's reasonable. If a different universe is being made all the time, different constants, quantities, and qualities, then one is bound to look like ours. The multiverse theory is basically a theory that there is a mechanism that keeps producing universes with different constants, quantities, and qualities. Like bubbles in a pot, universes keep coming to existence endlessly. Just another one keeps popping into existence all the time. It's only a matter of time before a life-permitting universe like ours is formed. Now that's plausible, isn't it? That this could happen, that this could result in a universe like ours, right? Okay, it's plausible. What's the evidence for it? Now, there are actually lots of problems with this theory. And the first is that there's just no evidence. There's no evidence of other universes or of the mechanism which creates them. So we need to understand that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but there's definitely not much for this theory to depend upon. It's not sitting on much. So to hold it up as, oh, this is a theory that removes the design hypothesis. No, not so much. You can use it as a theory, but it doesn't sit on much. So that's the first problem. It just has no evidence. Second, The multiverse itself would require fine-tuning, as a mechanism would be needed to create universes. Again, something that keeps on tampering with different quantities, qualities, and conditions. Sounds a lot like a machine, doesn't it? A machine requires fine-tuning. So this itself does not remove the explanation for where did fine-tuning come from? No, it just pushes it back a step. This machine type thing is making universes. What about the fine-tuning for this machine? What can explain that? Third, who runs this operation? Again, this is an orderly operation. How did it come to be this way? Who's in charge? What's going on up there? Next, if the mechanism were timeless, our universe would be timeless as well, as it would have been created an infinite amount of time ago. Now, this is a philosophical argument, meaning it's definitely one of my favorite ones because I love philosophy. So just bear with me for a minute. If you understood an argument from the last episode, then you'll get this one if you just stick with me. So the mechanism would have been created from all eternity, an infinite amount of time ago. Now, this is the point that's the most important for you to get. So if the multiverse, the mechanism that creates all the universes, is eternal, which it would have to be, then it's been creating for all eternity, an infinite amount of time ago. If that's the case, then our universe would also have been created an infinite amount of time ago. If that's the case, then there's an infinite amount of moments before now. And as we saw in the last time, there cannot be an infinite amount of past events. Otherwise, this moment will never get here. I'm just going to explain that briefly, in case you guys don't remember. Imagine a Marvel movie. There are post-credit scenes, scenes that come after the credits. Now, if the credits never end, there's just an infinite amount of names that never ends. Another name keeps popping up before the post-credit scene, then that will never end, resulting in the post-credit scene will never begin. For the post-credit to begin, the credits have to end. It's the same with past moments. In order for this moment to begin, the past moments must end. If there's an infinite amount of past moments before now, this moment could never begin. Yet we're here, therefore, the amount of past events cannot be infinite, but must be finite in number. So that's another problem. The universe itself cannot be eternal because we would have been created an infinite amount of time ago, yet we weren't. Now, there are a couple more problems I'm going to explain. So again, there's another reason to believe that the mechanism needs a beginning. The Born-Guth-Vilenkin theorem confirms this. And we already saw from the last time that whatever begins to exist, needs a cause. So this really just pushes it back a step once again. It still needs a cause if it did have a beginning. So next, Dr. William Lane Craig said, we'd expect small regions of order with no more than a single intelligent observer. Instead, in our world, it's overflowing with order, and it's teeming with intelligent observers, contrary to what we'd expect. Next, the mathematical concept of infinity in the multiverse is faulty. Imagine this. In the multiverse, only a small amount, say 0.0000001%, a small amount, of the universes have life. Makes sense, right? The question is, how many universes is that? An infinite amount. Why? Because a fraction of an infinite is an infinite. Now, of those universes, let's say that only 0.0000001%, small amount, have human beings. How many universes is that? An infinite amount, because a fraction of an infinite is an infinite. Of those universes, 0.00001% have you. What amount of universes is that? An infinite amount. Of those universes, only 0.0000001% have you on this Zoom. How many universes is that? An infinite amount. And lastly, of those universes, let's say an even smaller amount, 0.0000000000000000001% have everything else exactly the same as it is in this universe. How many universes is that? An infinite amount, because a fraction of an infinite is an infinite. And here's the problem. Therefore, there are an infinite amount of universes, which is equivalent to the totality of the multiverse, which are exactly like ours, with no difference. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to say that again. So there's an infinite amount of universes, That's equivalent to the whole of the multiverse, which are exactly like ours. That doesn't make any sense. Now, the only objection someone could make to that point is that, there actually aren't an infinite amount of that kind of universe. And the question is there, okay, how many are there? 76? 1? How do you know? So this takes us back to the first point. There's just no evidence. So on one side, you have the extreme faulty reasoning of the multiverse. On the other, you just have no evidence to stand on. So whichever position you take, there's faulty reasoning. So this is really the next point. Well, it's kind of connected. You cannot have an actual infinite amount of individual parts. This is really important. I didn't understand it for a long time. You cannot have an actual infinite amount of individual parts. So let's just imagine I have an infinite amount of marbles. What happens when I take out one marble? How many am I left with? An infinite amount. What happens when you take away half? How many am I left with? An infinite amount. So there's no difference. And that is really the big issue. See, if you take an infinite amount, you subtract something, and there's no difference. Bad, faulty reasoning, mathematically. If you take an infinite amount, you subtract 1, and you say, oh, there are 57 left. How'd you get that? Then it's not an infinite amount. So you see, either way, you're left with faulty mathematical reasoning. So no matter what view in the multiverse someone takes, there's always faulty reasoning. And it gets even weirder. I'm going to give you one more point. Then I'm going to shush about the multiverse. But I'm going to give you one more point. It does get weirder. If all the universes reflect all possibilities, then there's a universe where Abraham Lincoln is still alive. Or there's a universe where people put salsa in their coffee rather than creamer. Don't want to be there. I like salsa, but not that much. Or there's a universe in which Pokemon are the dominant species. Or there's a universe where God does actually exist. Maybe this is just that universe. You should become a Christian. God exists in this universe. So you see, it becomes nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. So not only is there no evidence for the multiverse, but there's so many issues, not just scientific, but just logical. So this theory really just falls apart. And I'm not the only one who shows this. Physicist Paul Davies said, prominent scientists and commentators have used words such as fantasy, virus, and intellectually bankrupt on their denunciations. For those theoretical physicists hard at work trying to formulate a unique final theory, the multiverse comes across as a cheap way out. Randomness plus observer selection strikes any physicist as an ugly and impoverished explanation compared with an overarching mathematical theory that pins down the properties of the world with a quantitative precision and interweaves them into harmonious unity. So we've investigated the first two. Physical necessity, we saw that can't explain it. We saw that chance just is not a good explanation. And the multiverse, as added on to give chance another chance, it just falls apart. So the multiverse really just, it's not a good piece of evidence to try to say, hey, chance could do it. We don't need design. So what are we left with? Design. And I'm not the only one who's arrived at this, as understanding this is the best explanation for this complexity. Take cosmologist Ed Harrison, who said, here's the cosmological proof of the existence of God, the design argument of Paley, updated and refurbished. The fine-tuning of the universe provides prima facie evidence of design. Or take physicist Sir John Houghton, who said, our current understanding is that for the universe to develop in the right way, incredibly precise fine-tuning has been required in its basic structure in the conditions at the time of the Big Bang. Or take physicist Paul Davies one more time. There's, for me, powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. And that's why we feel at home here. It's not just that it's comfortable or that it feels right, it's that it is right. It appears as though the world was created with us in mind. It can't come together by natural needing to be this way. Chance is not a good explanation because we see the complexity and the probability of having these 122 constants, and who knows how many more they've discovered by now. It doesn't make any sense. The probability, this points to intelligence. This points to design. And this actually makes a lot of sense considering our findings. There's a godlike entity behind it all. We saw that last week in the cause of the universe. And now it appears there was intentionality in creating this world with us in mind. So last week we saw how the world began and what this cosmos must have been like. Today we saw what this world is like. It's incredibly complex and it's literally geared for life. So it's convincing that there's a master plan behind the cosmos. There's a master plan around there. And we are the very center of this plan, life. Now, this should either thrill us or terrify us. Either way, this should prompt us to continue our journey to discover this incredible mind.